A very welcome to this ABCD Season 3. ABCD is Anybody Can Do of Research Methodology. As you know, it is a Season 3, and in this Season 3, I've already discussed that I'll be having my international guests coming up here who will be joining with me, will be joining in this channel to share their views on some of the topics which are very important for the research. Today, the special guest that I have with me is Dr. Christine Phiri Mushibwe, professor, and she is a very seasoned researcher herself, and she also have won a very prestigious award of the most influential women of Africa in the industry and government from the CEO Global. And Prof is also the only female vice chancellor among 54 private universities in Zambia. So with no further delay, we would like to listen from Prof herself. Welcome, Prof, to the channel.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it's indeed it's a pleasure always joining from Zambia to this platform. Actually, this platform have got the viewers from a different part of the globe. When I get the YouTube insight and the statistics, who are the viewers, so it's really exciting to see the viewers coming from Europe, from the Middle East, Africa, Central Asian countries, subcontinent, Australia. So it is really covering the globe, and it really excites me more when I see that people, researchers, do listen to your good thing that you want to do. And in fact, this is a good platform, I would say, for a lot of young aspirant researcher, promising researcher who really wants to find out the way forward to understand the research platform based on which they can further get developed themselves through different academic books and other ways. So, Prof, today we want to discuss about literature review, and that's an important topic for the researcher. If you're writing an article, if you're writing a thesis, so literature review plays a very important role. So, Prof, we would like to listen from you, your views on the literature review. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is an exciting part, actually, of any dissertation or for any student. And it's one part that I love very much besides the methodology of the research. But one thing that I think every student needs to know is that literature review does not stand independent of every other chapter in a dissertation or a thesis, or even if it is a journal paper. So the literature review is very important because it is supposed to be connected from your introduction to the literature review, to the methodology, finally to the findings, as well as the conclusion of the whole research. The literature would have informed you. The literature would have exposed that gap that you are really looking out for. Because if you are doing research, it's not just about information loading. It's about you, as much as possible, contributing to either the existing debates in that particular area, or you are contributing in terms of new knowledge that you are adding to the already existing body of knowledge, or you are developing new theories, or you are developing new concepts. So all that needs to be taken into consideration so that at the end of your literature review, we can see something. What have you really added in terms of developing new concepts, in terms of contributing to the existing debates in your area that you are actually researching about? There's one man that I like quoting very much. I think my research students, I have taught at Unilas University right here in Zambia, at Zambia Open University, at University of Africa, and now I'm also teaching at Unicaf University. When I was in England, I taught in China, and I also taught research students at Leeds Trinity University, and I supervised quite a number of students. And I got to discover that there's one thing that tends to be missing in most of the literature review, and that is what Albert Einstein says. Albert Einstein says, the important thing is not to stop questioning, curiosity has got its own reason for existing. And that is one thing that you need to engage in. You need to show curiosity. I tend to inform my students that when you are doing a literature review, look at the books that you have collected to yourself and begin to look at those books as individuals that are sitting right there with you at the table. And each one of them is contributing, and you are equally contributing, because we want to hear your voice. We don't just want a literature review that is information loaded. We want to see a review that has got the views of different authors, as well as you yourself who is writing. So we need to hear what is actually going on. So now the thing is, the era in which we are is one where there's too much information everywhere. And you need to know, what are you looking for? Because the world now has become so small. Information is everywhere. It is in those days when we were doing our studies at the university, when you need to sleep in the library, because that was the only place you could actually sit and read literature upon literature, journal upon journal. This time you can do it at home. Just click your finger and literature is everywhere. Information is everywhere, but you need to know, where are you looking? You know, you need to understand that it's not every article that is there for you to review, because some of them may not even be scholarly at all. Some of them may not even be peer reviewed. And so you need to know that. So peer-reviewed journals are good, scholarly literature are good, indices, reliable and scholarly electronic sources. Wikipedia, in a number of universities where I have been, Wikipedia is discouraged, because anybody can wake up in the morning and submit anything there. So you might be citing information that may not even be scientific, so to say, because we are looking for facts. So can we find facts in information that you get on Wikipedia? Somebody had told me that if you go to Wikipedia, the best thing to do is go to the reference area and check that reference, and then go forward with that reference and read what that book actually says, other than just what has been submitted on Wikipedia. So references of references, they are also good, but it's important for master's students as well as PhD students that we are very careful about secondary citations. It's better you follow up the book where it is and read exactly, so that you understand the context within which it was written. So that was part of my introduction anyway. So what is literature review? You know, like I have indicated, literature review is supposed to be informed by the introductory chapter, and it is also supposed to contribute to the subsequent chapters. So right within your first, your introduction, you've got objectives. Objectives are very, very important. So when you have formulated your objectives are also supposed to be seen to inform your literature review. Because if you remove your objectives from your literature review, then we don't know what you are looking at, because you have formulated your objectives to guide your research. So if the objectives are nicely written, and remember, I'm sure the people that looked at objectives indicated that they are supposed to be smart with action verbs, so that then you can follow that nicely in your literature review, because now you know exactly what you are looking out for. So it's not just about, all right, I'm writing about COVID research or COVID, because COVID is the pandemic that is going on now, and all you now need to do is write about COVID, then it is just misplaced. We want it to be focused. Why is it focused? Because your objectives have been able to guide you. Some people have ended up using the same objectives to sort of like section each discussion as they go on. But others have also been provided, because universities have got a framework of how you need to structure your literature review. So you need to be aware as to what your university demands of you. So others have defined literature review as a review. It's a search and evaluation of the available literature in your given subject or chosen area. And that is important. I remember when I was doing my literature review, I went into the library, and my first draft, my supervisors, I said, I don't know what you're talking about here, because it was not even in my area at all. Because you need to know, this is the area within which I am actually researching. So the literature you are going to be looking out for should be within the particular area. And others have said that it is just a collection of materials on a particular topic, not necessarily the great literacy texts of the world. Literature can be anything from just a set of Ministry of Education, probably reports, But again, you need to be careful with such kind of reports. For what purposes were they developed? And then it can also be a review of published information on a particular subject area information, or in a particular subject area within a certain time period. And of all those explanations I've given, one of the things that has come out is, in your particular area, don't go about at the market buying everything. You need to know exactly what you are looking out for. So be focused. So literature review should not be descriptive. It is not a survey of every single thing written about your topic, or a book to book or article to article summary. No, it is a review. It is an engagement of literature in your area. You are engaging the particular literature that you have gathered yourself to look at, and then you want to engage whatever they have written about your area. Because remember, there's an issue of gap. Your statement of the problem or problem statement is considered to be the gap, because you have said there is something. Last week I was listening to Professor, and he described how to come up with a statement of the problem nicely. And so when you have now said, this is the gap, this is what I want to do, informed by your background information, that's when you can actually now come up with your objectives. Those objectives now will inform what you are going to be looking out for in your literature review. So coming on, it's also important to know that the focus of your literature review is to summarize and synthesize the arguments and ideas of others without adding new contributions. So you've got what probably Dr. Mushiwe has written, or what Professor Asif has written about literature review. And I say, all right, so this is what Dr. Mushiwe has said. Okay, oh, this is what Professor Asif has written about literature review. Okay, so now you look at those and you begin to, so what is it that is different from what she has submitted and what Professor Asif has submitted, or Professor Yu has submitted? Then you begin to analyze that information. So it reviews, the literature review should provide a solid background for a research paper's investigation. It's the depth, the breadth of the literature review emphasizes the credibility of the writer. So your credibility is within that literature which you are doing. What exactly are you coming up with? What exactly have you discovered from this literature in relationship to your gap? Is it confirming your gap? Is it refuting your gap? Or are you developing something within that particular gap? Okay, so you've got a literature review it surveys the literature in your chosen area of study that you need to remember. It shows familiarity with a body of knowledge and establishes the credibility of your work. You need to remember that. It integrates and summarizes what is known about your subject. You need to remember that. It synthesizes the information in that particular literature into a summary. And then it also demonstrates that you have learned from others and that your research is a starting point of new ideas. Okay, you are contributing to existing debates. You are contributing new knowledge, if that is what you're going to come up with, to the existing body of knowledge. And you critically analyze information that has been gathered by identifying gaps. All right, there's a gap in what Prof. Asif said. There's a gap in what Dr. Mushiwe said. There's a gap in what Professor Yu said. So what is it that you are coming up with? And that is how we end up with theories, because there's a gap, there's something. I read an article one time and I was so impressed about it, because it was talking, I think, about an area, I can't remember the area in USA, but there are normally a lot of hurricanes that happen there. And this young boy, I think he must have been about 10 or 12 years old, had been looking and seeing how big people struggled to fill bags with sand, and then they pile these sandbags around to prevent the water to come to their houses. And this young boy was looking and thinking, It's a good idea, yes, but it's not doing what it is supposed to be doing. There's a gap here. And he went into the labs and began coming up with this theory where he came up with a sandbag, which is not heavy to carry like what the big people were doing, because when they fill these bags with sand, then they began carrying them on their shoulders or putting them in trucks, carrying them to a place where they could actually block the water. But this boy came up with just a mere sack. So that sack was made in such a way that immediately you line them up, all these different sacks, you line them up. You have not carried heavy things, but when you line them up, immediately the water hits those sacks, they would actually swell up and block the water completely. So you can imagine there's something he contributed that the order theory did not provide. It is something that he added to the already existing knowledge. The knowledge about the sandbags was already there, but he added to it and reduced the effort, the labor that the other people were going into by ensuring that what he provided was something that was acceptable and at least was able to reduce the time and the labor that the other people were going into. So that is an example of what your literature review should be able to do. So present your literature review in an organized manner, because if it is haphazard, then there's a problem there. People will not understand exactly what you are doing in that literature review. Okay. So always remember, you have an audience. When you are writing your literature review, you have an audience. It's not you writing. And that's one thing I learned early when I was doing my literature review. You need to know that whilst you are writing on your own, you have an audience that is going to read your literature review. Think about them. And then you need to know that there must be an argument. And remember the argument, you have already presented your argument in the first chapter or your introduction. Your statement of the problem is your argument, which you now need to begin to develop in your literature review. So you build your argument, and people should be able to see it that, yes, this is the argument. I tend to read a lot of literature review because I supervise a lot of master's students. I think at the moment I've got close to 12 PhD students that I'm supervising, and I don't know how many master's students that I'm supervising. So I keep a folder for each one of them so that I can actually track them. One of the things that is so common in the literature review is a situation where I don't see any argument. And I can tell from there that the very first chapter has been problematic. And you see, because I supervise a lot of students, I make sure I have had a contact with each and every student, at least the first contact where we are so sure of our statement of the problem and the objectives. Because when these are actually wrong, then even the literature review is not going to be anywhere. So when you establish your statement of the problem, then you know that that is something that you need to build on. And then the others, what I get to see is, right from the very beginning of the literature review, I don't hear anything about their statement of the problem up to the very conclusion. And then I'm wondering, so what gap? What is your argument? You know, because when you are reading any book or any literature that you have gathered from whatever sources you've gotten the literature from, there must be something that you are looking out for. So you are saying that this is not matching up with what I'm arguing about. Because for instance, if I'm looking at the implications of COVID, I'm going to use COVID because that is what is going on at the moment. The implications of COVID in primary schools. And my statement of the problem is not the implications of COVID, because that's what I see. Students tend to repeat the title and make it their statement of the problem. The title is not a statement of the problem. When you are saying the implications of COVID in primary schools, what is your problem? Is it the lack of the lack of COVID protocols being followed? Because if that is that, then that is what you need to be able to say. So when you are reading literature about me, then you are able to say, all right, yes, she writes about cholera. There's nothing that is so similar about COVID and cholera. But then I'll be able to say, no, there's something similar. They are both pandemics. Okay. They are both pandemics in the sense that they are both affecting masses of people, and they are both contagious, and so there must be restrictions that are put. So you can actually read my article and be able to say, yes, she says that cholera is not a pandemic. However, cholera is a pandemic because you give the reasons why you claim that cholera is a pandemic. Then you can actually be able to say, yes, it's a pandemic, just as COVID is a pandemic, because it is also transferable. So you see, you are arguing. Okay, then be critical and analytical. I'm going to say something a bit about being critical and analytical. This is very important because these are certain skills that we are looking out for in any student who is doing a literature review. We need to see the skill of analysis, okay, critical analysis. And then it is a dialogue with the literature. I tend to say it's an you engage yourself with the literature that you have gathered. So let it become alive. Every book, every journal, every article, every scholarly article, let them become alive. You see Professor Asif, you see me sitting there, and we begin arguing, we dialogue and critically say, all right, I understand what you are saying. However, that is not what we are looking for here. Yes, I understand what you are saying. However, this is not what we are looking for. Yes, what Professor Asif is saying is something that is similar with what is being put across here. You see, you are actually dialoguing with the literature. And don't lose yourself. Okay, we want to hear you say something. Don't leave the books to speak. No, we also want to hear you speak. I want to hear your voice, and I keep on telling students, where is your voice? All I'm hearing is this literature cited, but where is your voice? Your voice needs to come out. This literature, and it depends again upon universities. When I was doing my PhD, my university said you use the first person. So I kept on using I, and it was okay. But when you come to Zambia, they will tell you, no, we don't want to hear the first person. We want to hear the third person. And so I keep on saying now, use the author says or the researcher says, as long as there is consistency, then that is all right. So you need to understand what, if it's a journal publication, what is it that they are looking out for and what are their guidelines? If it is a dissertation that you are writing, what is the framework that the university has submitted so that you can actually follow that to the letter? And then use academic language. One of the students, in fact, a lot of students have asked me and said, what is academic language? And I keep on like, okay, what is academic language? Get an academic book, read it, that is the academic language. There is a language. It's almost like in any organization, there is a lingo that they use. I worked in one organization in England, and I remember when I did a report, the CEO sat me down and said, in this organization, we've got a particular lingo. So you don't just write a report, you need to ensure that you use that lingo used in that particular organization. So research also has got its own language. Academic writing has got its own language. So as you read academic books, scholarly books, watch out for the language that is in use. That's how you learn. It's all right. So this is how we are supposed to be looking at some of these concepts, and this is the language that is supposed to be used. So learning about the academic language is something that is very easy, because the more you read scholarly articles, academic books and all that, you begin to learn and familiarize yourself with the academic language. And try as much as possible to understand the definition of certain concepts. And remember that there's also what is known as operational definitions, because how probably I define gender in my book may not be the way you would want it to be defined in that particular document. So you need to be able to explain that, to say, all right, these concepts or terms that have got ambiguous meanings in this particular document, this is how it is going to be defined, so that the reader, remember, the audience needs to understand, say, all right, so when she talks about a child, she's talking about one from 1 year to 12 years old. Whereas probably United Nations may define it differently, but you can actually be able to say, no, I locked my definition in this literature review or in this document. So be consistent. Think about the style you are using, the numbering system you are using, the referencing system you are using. Remember, it should be a document that is understandable. So if you're using the APA referencing system, consistently use it up to the end. If you're using the Harvard referencing system, consistently use it up to the end. Don't keep on changing the referencing system here and there, or the style of numbering. If you start with A, B, C, D, it should be A, B, C, D. If you start with 1, 2, 3, it should be 1, 2, 3 up to the very end. So be consistent. We need to see consistency throughout. Watch your grammar as well. I read a number of, especially PhDs, I tend to be very, very hard on them, because I'm not expecting, for instance, in Zambia, it's English, and they are writing, the language of communication is English. And then this PhD student is failing to to put himself across or herself in English. And I'm thinking, so what are we doing here? Because you are a PhD student who is supposed to be communicating your research. And if you're failing to use the English grammar properly, then there's a problem. So get somebody to edit it and proofread it for you. That is not a problem. And I tend to supervise dissertations for education students, and they waste because they're even afraid of giving their work to their teacher of English, because he is a head teacher. He's afraid that the teacher will know that his language is not very good. I think this is not an area where you need to be ashamed of anything. We learn from one another. So let somebody read your document before you even submit it. Even if it is a journal, let it be read by different people, because what you might be thinking has got a there may not even, the there may not even be there, but it's because it's your eye that is seeing it because of what you have perceived in your mind. And like I said at the beginning, be focused and be organized. Move from the general to the specific. Don't begin from the specific and then you begin moving to the general. Start from probably a world view. Others will be able to tell you that. Start from the world view and then bring it down to the continent probably, and then from the continent to the region, and then from the region finally to the country, and then maybe from the country to that particular organization that you are focusing on. So try as much as possible to be focused. But remember, we need as much as possible to be critical. And I'll look at that now, because I just want to say something about you being critical. How critical are you in your work? Now, critical thinking has to do with asking the most useful questions. And remember, you are wanting to establish or confirm your gap. There is a gap. So because you are wanting to confirm that, that will come about because of your critical thinking. So you are asking the most useful questions in the most creative and systematic way in order to yield a coherent and credible story. So critical thinkers search for signals and good reason before believing something is true. Not everything you read is true. I can write something from my own context, and it might not be true, probably from where Professor Asaf is, because the environment is totally different. Certain books are written in the mode which is totally alien to your own country. So look at that as well. Can I take this information? And that is why in research, especially when you are doing methodology, there's what we call relatability, and there's also generalization, because you cannot generalize everything and say, all right, all men are liars. Oh, is it? And I tend to say my husband is not a liar, at least. So I remove my husband. I don't know about Professor Asif. So you need to be very careful when you are analyzing. Is it true that all men are liars? Or is it true that all women are thieves? They steal money from their husbands? That might not be true, you see. So that's why every literature you read, you need to make sure that is it coherent? You think through and you understand where it is coming from, because what they are writing might not even be in line with what you are actually looking at. Then there are three things that I want you to think of, and that is describing, analyzing, and evaluating. So the questions that mostly we tend to ask are who, what, who, where, when, how, why, and sometimes you say, what if, what next, and so what? You know, because in the process, you discover that that book you are reading has got nothing to do with what you are analyzing when you have asked it those questions. Okay, so when you are describing, you define clearly what. Remember, I'm looking now at what. So you are describing, so what is COVID? Okay. So when you say what is COVID, what you are actually doing there is just describing exactly what is involved, where it takes place, under what circumstances. Then you are just describing what COVID actually really is. And when you come to analyzing now, this is where you now begin to scrutinize and clarify how many parts fit into a whole, or give reasons for a particular, why is COVID going on and spreading? Why is COVID spreading in America, for instance? You are looking at contrast, different elements. Why is this new variant only in South Africa and not probably in England? Or so you're looking at all those. You are scrutinizing and clarifying how parts fit into a whole. You are giving reasons. You are comparing. You are contrasting different elements. You are actually showing your understanding of that particular subject. Because if your understanding is not good, you find that even your literature review is going to be shallow. And we are going to be saying, so what have you established? Because you can only establish if you have critically analyzed. So that's why we've got the analysis. Then the third one, which is evaluation. This is when you now begin to judge the success or failures of something, its implication. This is where we begin to hear your voice more, because now you are telling us what your conclusion about this COVID situation is all about. Its implications. What are the implications? What about its values? So it's the evaluations that lead to conclusions. It's these evaluations where now you begin to tell us where the actual gap is actually. This is usually at the end of the piece of work that you are writing, either at the end of your literature review or at the end of the passage, depending upon, for instance, if you've segmented your literature review according to the global, then we want to see how you have concluded there. If it is the region, we want to see how you have concluded there. Until finally you come to the very organization where you are doing your research. We want to see what your summary really out is there. And then finally you give us what the conclusion is. Remember, there's empirical research or empirical data. Now you're looking at what other researchers have said within that particular book. What have they said? They have also done a research in COVID. What was their conclusion? They have also done a research in COVID. What was their focus? So you want to make a conclusion now so that you can say, this research I'm doing is supposed to be done because this is the evidence that has actually been produced. I don't know how I'm doing with time. Then I can actually conclude.
Yeah, Prof. I think you can conclude. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Prof. This insightful information about critically analyzing, critically evaluating. What I always tell to my students, Prof, I see a lot of chapters. I see literature survey, not the review. Well, the chapter says literature review. As we have done an excellent survey, according to him, according to whom, we have filled it up. But where is the review? Yeah. So that's where we get so carried away in highlighting all the global academic researchers and things. As you, Prof, very much correctly mentioned, we start with a much general way. So what the world has to offer in this particular topic, then narrow down to my region, then narrow down to my country and specific to the organization, perhaps, if I'm focusing like that. So at the end, so what? So as you said, where is your voice? So that voice has to come up, and that's why you're going to identify. Prof, one question I have from one of my participant who gave me a question earlier. It says that how many gaps should be there when you are writing a literature gap? Is one gap good enough, or should you have multiple gaps to conclude your literature review?
That is relative, actually. It's relative because there are certain research where probably might even have multiple gaps. And there are certain research which can probably have only one gap. At least there must be a gap. So relative, like I have indicated, you could have about 2 or 3 gaps that you have established, or you could even have just one gap which informs that there is need for this research to be carried out. There is something missing from what somebody was able to do. And I am doing this research because I'm adding, I'm contributing, I'm confirming.
Okay, Prof. And Prof, the gap that you identify, is there any mechanism that should align with your objectives?
Yes, it has to. It has to align because your literature review is informed by the objectives themselves. So at the end of it, you'll discover that it is from there, it will be able to show, and it will be very easy for you from those same objectives, your gap as well as the methodology. Because you might find that your gap cannot be researched using a qualitative research. it has to do, you could have begun by thinking this is supposed to be qualitative, it has to be qualitative. But at the end of the day, you discover it is not even qualitative, it is supposed to be quantitative. Yes.
Right. And Prof, last question. It's another one. Saying that nowadays we have access to so much information at fingertips. The moment we search in, before we can breathe in the next breath, we have got 1 million coming up in front of us. So how we actually think that, yes, this could be an authentic place to quote from? Of course, other than the Wikipedia, Investopedia, those PDFs, we see a lot of articles coming up, popping up, a lot of newspaper information coming up. So initially, for a researcher to find out, okay, this I should not be, considering, but this is what I could be considering. So what could be that first way to identify the differentiation between them, Prof?
Okay, I think one of the things that I was taught myself and which I keep on telling students is look out for peer-reviewed articles, look out for peer-reviewed journals, look out for good publishing companies. All right, previously we used to know too much about Sage publication, but these days they are, it's not more to do with the hard copy books now. There are so many publishers all over there. And it's very clear, immediately you go on your Google, you Google a particular document. One of the things that you can also do is PDF, look for PDF